Hi, it's conversation time. We glad that you could join us, and we do conversation about life and all kinds of exciting things, and particularly on story, because we're trying to figure out what it means that we all have a story, and we have more than one story. We have lots of stories, and that being part of a story is very special, and being able to share and listen to stories. So my friend and partner for this is Kate McGowan. And Kate, would you like to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the executive director of United Way of Addison County, and I've been there for about 12 years. I moved to Vermont almost 20 years ago. I live up in Lincoln. I live there with my family, my husband, and I have 3 sons and 2 dogs. Love Vermont. Haven't looked back ever since we got here. I'm a recovering CPA and very active in lots of nonprofit and business communities. What else? I recently went back to school, so I'm getting my MBA in collaborative leadership. And I just thought I should add something else to my schedule.
Right. Yes, of course.
and as we talked about earlier, I love cycling. Took up cycling again 4 years ago and just got back from a fabulous 7-day trip.
We did talk about that earlier, and we thought maybe we won't have anything to talk about now. We've used it all up. But I don't think so. So why don't you pick out a place where you'd like to start? Because this is really a chance to have a conversation with you and to listen to you and to share.
It's interesting. As I thought about coming here, I thought, which story do I want to tell? And as you so eloquently said, there's so many stories that we all weave together. I think the interesting part of being the director of United Way is that I'm there accidentally. When I started my career, there wasn't a clear path for working in the nonprofit sector or the health and human sector, and I forged a way accidentally, sort of stumbled upon it at first glance, but at the second glance, I think it was quite intentional. You know how you look back in your life and you can see each stepping stone, like, oh, I can trace it back and see how I landed here. And I think part of the landing here had to do with always being interested in bringing the best of the business world and the nonprofit world together, because we're more alike than we are dissimilar. And I continue to look at that today.
Can you tell us a little bit about the United Way? I mean, everything has a title.
Yes.
And sometimes we understand titles, and sometimes we don't understand titles. So maybe a little bit about the background of United Way.
It's a good question, because it's so funny. In the United Way landscape, we know that United Way as a brand is trusted, and people know they've heard about the United Way. And then you ask the second question, and what do they do? And we actually have video from across the country. They say, I don't know, good stuff. So yes, we do good stuff. The history is we started in the late 1800s in Denver, Colorado. And it starts like a joke in terms of a minister, a rabbi, and somebody else walked into a bar and thought they should try to figure out how to create.
Heard that.
Yeah, I know. But in this case, they came together to try to figure out how to create some solutions to some recently emerging social issues as Denver started to grow quickly. And they really looked at trying to bring people together and identify the problems that they wanted to solve together, and then set out to solve them. So that's a long, rich history that started as community chests, and eventually all sort of came under the umbrella of United Way. Our United Way here in Addison County is coming up on its 50th year, so we're about to celebrate a big anniversary. And in the last 10 years or so, United Way has also gone international. It's partly in response to globalization of our corporate partners and being asked to step into how to help their employees volunteer and give and be active in their communities as they started looking at outside their own corporate walls and to their impact in community and how to be of assistance.
That helps give a perspective, and I thank you about that. And but can you connect it back to you early on? What about your childhood and those early days that would say to you, I'm going to be an executive. No, you didn't do that, did you?
I wanted to be president of the United States.
Oh,
or actually, I wanted to be president
course.
of the United States, a veterinarian or a gymnast.
Okay.
Yeah, didn't work out. So the connection, I think, There's two connectors, I think.
Mm-hmm.
One is very early on in my life, I understood about volunteering and getting involved. We moved a lot, but my parents both volunteered at the schools that we went to, or as coaches, or in Girl Scouts, or what have you. So I saw examples of giving back. Now, some of it was self-serving. It often helped me directly, but lots of other kids as well. And the schools that I went to required volunteering. So even though we moved quite a bit, the way I learned from a very young age to get involved, to learn about my community, was to volunteer there. And one of the early lessons was, I know that I always got more than I gave in those circumstances. So that was an early formation, I would say. And then when I went to school and I bounced around degrees a little bit, or tried to find my way, landed on economics and accounting. When I started doing my accounting work, even at Pricewaterhouse, I had a lot of nonprofit clients. And so starting, as I talked about earlier, bridging that gap between best practices in the business community, and really seeing ahead that nonprofits really have to act like a business. They have to be really smart, and they have to do all the right things in order to survive and thrive, because their mission is too important to be lackadaisical around some of the key core business principles. Likewise, for the business world, how do you take more than the bottom line of dollars into your world so that you have intrinsic value and that you have meaning in your world? And so always bridging those two gaps. And I think United Way clearly is about volunteering and giving back into the community, but it also is about bringing those best practices to both those sectors, right? We give an opportunity for the business community to really get involved in their community in ways other than business driven, which is really important. And likewise help nonprofits develop some of those skills that they need to really thrive in some difficult situations right now.
Was there a particular institution or organization that caught your interest when you were first beginning down this path, that you became involved with that organization, and that helped to lay a foundation for you?
So early in my career, when I had a whole array of interesting nonprofits, ranging from Caltech to little tiny historical societies, and so I think that it wasn't necessarily one particular mission. It's really a love of what the nonprofit world can bring into our communities and our world, and I think, wouldn't it be neat if every single person was passionate about something, maybe a few things, and really got involved, right? So I certainly love the fact that we have such an array of interests and ways to plug into a community to make it better. And I think why I love United Way is because it's not one mission. It's a broad span of over 30 programs and organizations that I get to sort of connect with and connect to in my community.
And they're quite diverse, right?
They are.
In what way are they diverse?
They are diverse in size and structure and mission. So we work with organizations that are completely volunteer run and have budgets of less than $30,000 all the way up to multi-million-dollar organizations with over several hundred employees and the whole gamut. We work with organizations, our impact areas loosely are health, education, and financial stability. A lot can fit into each of those budgets or into those buckets. I would say that United Way is concerned about people from birth to end of life and community in its most robust way. So if you can fit into that, you can be partner with me. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's 30 organizations?
About 30 organizations that we fund, yeah.
And all in Addison County?
All in Addison County. Well, they do work in Addison County. Some are housed in Chittenden County, but have offices or do programming work here. And then we have other organizations that we partner with that we don't necessarily fund, but that we work closely together with in coalition work, or, again, with the business community, who are such important partners.
You said you were working on a degree.
I am.
A very unusual degree.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm going to Marlboro College, and it is a new program focus for them, and it's collaborative leadership. So an MBA in collaborative leadership, and it got my attention, and I think it's much like the work that we do in community, where I think we have to acknowledge that the issues that we're dealing with right now are bigger than one person or one organization. That it really is going to take all hands on deck and multiple viewpoints and a variety of viewpoints, and that takes some amount of collaboration. And so when we're looking at collective impact or really doing some amazing problem solving, ego has to get out of it, and an open table where we can share that leadership and respect each other and learn from each other and act together and act separately but in alignment becomes really important. And I don't think our structures, the way we're structured right now, doesn't allow that to happen. So I'm very curious about what do we have to do to our institutional hierarchies in order to create that kind of way of working together in a very different way.
What are the attitudes that need to be present in an organization so that they respond to collaboration? There might be another word that in another time or maybe in another place that they would respond to, like this is the home office. That's just one that comes out. So what are the kind of qualities that really are needed for people to get excited about collaboration?
Because it's hard, isn't it?
Yes, it is hard.
Golly, it's hard.
It is hard.
And I have found myself not enjoying it very much some days.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. You put your finger on it.
Yeah.
It is really hard, and it works. It's hard work.
It's hard work. So I think that's the first thing, is acknowledging it's hard work and it's time-consuming work, right? I think part of what an organization has to figure out is that it's committed, that it understands that we can't act as islands, and that what we're doing by ourselves is part of a bigger system. And so part of it is an understanding of systems, right? And what your place in it is, and how you impact and are impacted by others. And I think once you get to see that, then collaboration and shared leadership makes sense, right? But you have to get to that point first, where you acknowledge I'm impacting you and you're impacting me. If we want to really make change, let's work together on this. So that'd be the first thing. I think the second part would be a commitment to the time and relationship building and trust that it takes to work in that fashion. And I think the third part is real commitment to your mission. And the mission is bigger than, for United Way, my mission is bigger than raising money and funding agencies and creating these coalitions. It's really to solve those problems in our community, to identify them and fix them and make life better for everybody in our community. I can't do that by myself, right? And so how do I invite other people in and listen to them and support them in their efforts so that we're all doing what we can do best, right?
Well, when you use the word story, and do you find that some people might scratch their head about that and say, what do you mean? Or other people might say, yeah, that's exciting.
Yes, and yes.
How about different reactions that you get to story? How do they understand or misunderstand story?
So to that particular story of working together towards common good, I think, like so many things, that sounds really good, right? And then the difficulties in the details. So for instance, in the nonprofit sector would be for an executive director who is, her or his job is to create the best organization that they can. Right? Their sustainability is at stake. They're looking at the future. They're delivering on their mission as stated. Their board is rewarding them or punishing them based on what happens within that organization. The details of collaboration is that wall has to widen. It has to get a little softer. And here's where the details can really muck it up. There's a grant, and 3 agencies want it. Each of those executive directors, their job description is to get that grant. Can you imagine an ED going to their board and saying, I'm not going to apply for that grant because that other organization could do better by it? That's not how we're structured, right? So I think So the story, I think, is well received. Sure, we want to fix community issues. We want to work together, and then it starts to break down when it takes time, when you start to get into conflict, when you have to talk about the hard things, and where you truly have to. There's a price to pay for collaboration, right? And that's hard.
This may be a question you've thought about or not, but when you look at organizations, without getting into specifics about organizations, but just in general, organizations as an entity in our life, and an entity in this whole process of collaboration and of doing something significant. Do you have any thoughts about who tends to be the storyteller? I mean, there tends to be a storyteller in any organization that holds itself together over time.
Yeah.
So who tends to be the storyteller? The executive or someone else in the organization?
Wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody was a storyteller
Yes,
in the organization?
it would.
Right? I think there's such a reluctance for either leadership or storytelling. I believe that everybody can be a storyteller and everybody can be a leader, and I think they're entwined, right? Because when you tell your story, you're telling where you've been and where you want to go. You're telling it's a vision tale, right? And so, I think typically we default to executive directors. We're not always the best storytellers, so finding the good storyteller often defaults to the marketing person, which is a different kind of story.
Right.
But your frontline people, they have the stories. They're talking to people every day. They're doing the work. They're on the streets making those connections with people. They've got the stories. So I think the question for organizations is, how do you corral those stories and enable everybody to tell their story? So board members have a story. Volunteers have a story. Donors have a story. Your frontline has a story. Everybody has a story. How do you weave it together to give it meaning and to invite others into that story?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's an ongoing task, trying to find a way. And I guess, does that provoke people to become more fun-like in their life? When you talk about, well, what's your story?
Does it? Maybe it depends on the story, huh?
Well, if you go to a funeral, okay, just in broad generalization, if you go to a funeral, after the funeral's over, that's when the stories usually come. Sometimes, because of some shifts in how funerals are done now, stories can come out during whatever is the service that's going on. But usually it's when you're drinking coffee and you're eating those sandwiches and that someone has made in the kitchen, and or the piece of pie or a cake or whatever it is. That's when the story comes out, and when I go there, I sometimes find myself saying, "Why don't we have a recording going on now? Right now, collecting all of this. It's going to be lost." Yeah. So there was a question in there someplace.
Let's pull it out.
I don't exactly know. So,
well, I think you started with, does the story create a happier environment or something like that? And so, and perhaps we were headed towards, when you go to a funeral and the stories are allowed to flow, we've been to the ones that make you sad and the ones that make you happy. Right. And so, when a life has been well lived and the stories are bouncing off the walls, whether they make you laugh or cry, you can leave thinking, oh, that was a life well lived. That's fantastic. And so, maybe it brings in the bigger issue of who's going to tell your stories when it's your time, right? And golly, I better start working on that because I want mine to be happy.
What are they going to say about me?
What are they going to say? And I hope it's fun. It won't all be fun. No. I have children after all. They have stories. So I don't know. I don't know that stories are necessarily generate happiness, but perhaps yes, they do, because the stories give meaning. And I think part of the reason I'm in the nonprofit world was at the beginning of my career I didn't find much meaning in some of the work. And if you spend that much time at work, perhaps there should be something that touches your heart,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so when you allow the stories to be told, they can be heartfelt, and that I think by itself brings some
Mhm.
happiness.
Yeah,
Right.
it becomes a special moment, and that is sort of what if you're running an organization of service, that's what you're hoping for.
Mhm.
At some point, there'll be something that will capture. Well, it is one of my one of my friends was a professor. He asked an older professor one day, does he cry?
Mm.
And he said, yes, I do. I cry. And he said, when do you cry? He said, I cry when I hear the truth.
Mm.
And I have, since I learned that, I've thought about that. That is the truth.
Yeah.
When you hear the truth, that prompts not only rejoicing, it prompts tears.
Yeah.
And you, in some sense, hope that'll happen in any service that's going on
Yeah.
for the sake of a family or an individual, and that's providing help in time of need. And that's a very, very special thing when that happens.
It is. It is special. It's I think for the folks who are working directly with families that are in a struggling moment, and it may be a moment, it may be many moments strung
Mhm.
together. It's sacred work, right?
Mhm.
It's sacred work,
Yeah.
tending to people in our communities and tending to each other, to one another.
When you work with non-profits, are those moments somewhat different than the moments that might be in a for-profit organization? That I don't want to stretch that, but I just wondered if that hit a note with you.
Yeah. I think more and more, there's more and more work going on around multiple bottom lines, right? And finding
Mhm.
meaning and being connected to your community and understanding your corporate responsibilities and impact, right?
Mhm.
So I think that line is getting blurrier and blurrier, and I suspect that there's a lot more effort going on in terms of employee retention and creating a place where people want to be by creating better relationships and providing meaning of some sort. So let's be. I mean, the for-profit world has done amazing things in terms of shaping our culture and
Mhm.
creating solutions. Telephones and internets and food
Mhm.
production. I mean,
Mhm.
it's all remarkably connected. So I see more similarities between the for-profit and nonprofit sector than many people do. I think we like to divide and separate
Right.
and categorize. There's a lot more in common than is different.
That's encouraging.
I like to think
That's
so.
that really is encouraging, because it strikes that any one of the issues that faces us as a culture, and as multiple cultures, requires something broader that hold us together.
Mm.
And sometimes we hear about things that end up dividing us.
We seem to be a little divided these
And
days.
so an alliance with that has gone on for a long time can somehow seem in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think the question is, how do we get that? Not that story is everything, okay? Life is everything. Finding ways to live our life in moments of pain and in moments of joy, and story is a big part of that. But so I don't want to be guilty of. Because I love stories, and my main goal in life is to help encourage a storytelling movement. So everybody.
It's your lens.
Yeah,
It's a good
right.
lens.
So, but I really, so we're grateful that so many organizations, such as you work with, so diverse, right? I had a tough time with story when I was a kid because my mother would use the phrase, if she thought I wasn't telling the truth, she wouldn't, she would, the worst thing she'd say would be fibbing. Are you fibbing? And she would not say, you're lying. She wouldn't do that. But she would say, don't tell a story.
Oh, interesting.
So early in my life, I didn't have this positive feeling about stories because my mother was saying in her coded way, you're not telling the truth.
The story's a lie.
The story's a lie.
The story's a lie.
And so I've had to kind of overcome that whole process.
Well, and sometimes our stories are an exaggeration.
Exaggeration.
There you go.
My mother would have loved that word.
Please don't exaggerate.
Yeah.
And sometimes exaggeration's important, right? So some of
Yes,
our
it
story
is.
forms, our lesson stories,
Yeah.
are very exaggerated. Yeah, but it's funny. I was thinking about our grant application. It's a complicated grant application, but my favorite page is the page where we ask for 2 stories. And a lot of folks in the community say, "Oh, Kate McGowan, she's a data girl," and I am. I love data; it's really important. But it has to be married to the story, right? And so those stories that our agencies tell us are. They'll bring you to tears sometimes, right? Or they'll make you laugh, or just have great hope. And I'm so lucky to be able to bear witness to some of those stories in my work. Lucky me.
And we're fortunate to have you help increase those stories and their presence and their presence in our life and the service that's present in our life. So you should know that too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to talk about stories. Any particular story that, or story time, or that comes to your mind that you'd just like to share before?
Oh, that's a tough question.
I know it's a tough.
Yikes.
But you've asked a tough question or two.
I know. I have. I have.
So turnabout, my mother would say,
is fair play. Nothing comes to mind right now.
Sure.
But I was struck by a few conversations we had to go in this little half hour around the importance of story to teach the folks who are coming behind us, right? So the story of how we land in the nonprofit sector, or the story of why we do that work, or the story of how people find themselves suddenly in circumstances that they didn't expect to find themselves in. Those stories can bring us together to find those solutions, right? So if we can connect to the who we are, right, we can let those differences of how we fix it sort of fall aside and then work together to make it better, right? So I think your lens of story is really important in these times where things are so divided, and it seems to be it's either my way or the highway, or if you're not with us, you're against us, or what have you. It's no, we really can be in alignment. Tell me your story. I'll tell you my story. Let's see where that common ground is, and then let's work together because we have some work to do.
That is a beautiful way on which we can say thank you for being here. And thank you out there for listening to our conversation, being part of it. Enjoy your conversations with each other and with others when you think about your stories in your life. And celebrate life. And we're grateful for this. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.